Hello, how are you?
A little rushed, but settling in.
Well, welcome everyone. We are just going to wait a moment or two to allow people to join, and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everyone to our 40th anniversary Black History Month this year. We're very excited to have you all with us. First, I'd like to just go over a few technical things. Everyone's mics are off. You will be muted for the duration of the event, and your cameras will also be off. We ask that if at any point you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box, and we will do our best at the end of the session to get to any of your questions. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Thieler, who is the chair of the Woods Hole Diversity Initiative, to give us a few welcome remarks.
Hi, thanks, Angie. Good afternoon. My name is Rob Thieler. I'm the Center Director of the U.S. Geological Survey Coastal Marine Science Center here in Woods Hole and the chair of the Woods Hole Diversity Initiative. Welcome to the Woods Hole scientific community's ongoing 40th anniversary celebration of Black History Month. For those of you able to attend the previous 3 events, you have partaken of a truly engaging and rich series that delved deeply into the joys, the challenges, and the pain that members of our community have experienced, and how that calls us to both reflect and to act. Today's discussion of Dr. Ernest Everett Just is a significant historical exploration in that same vein. In 2004, the leaders of the 6 Woods Hole Science Institutions, the Marine Biological Laboratory, the NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center, the Sea Education Association, the USGS, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and the Woodwell Climate Research Center signed a memorandum committing our institutions to work together to attract and retain a more diverse workforce. That memorandum established the Woods Hole Scientific Community Diversity Initiative, which in turn established the Diversity Advisory Committee to support the institutions in their efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in and among the Diversity Initiative institutions, as well as the wider Woods Hole, Cape Cod, and Islands communities, and increasingly due to moving things online during the pandemic, the nation and the world. On behalf of the Diversity Initiative, I'd like to thank our local virtual host, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Falmouth Community Television for live streaming this month's programs, and the Woods Hole Diversity Advisory Committee, especially the Black History Month Committee, and co-chairs Angie Scott-Price and Larry Alade for putting together another outstanding series of events. Thank you again for attending today, and I'm pleased to turn things back over to Angie Scott-Price to lead today's program. Angie?
Thanks, Rob. We have indeed had some really great events this month, and I'm looking forward to today's as well. Before we jump in, I do want to acknowledge the 6 research institutions that provide the monetary and in-kind support for this month: the Marine Biological Laboratory, the NOAA Northeast Fisheries Science Center, the USGS Coastal and Marine Center, Sea Education Association, the Woodwell Climate Center, formerly known as the Woods Hole Research Center, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Especially thanks to Matt Barton for hosting today and other events, and just all around being great to work with. And often seems like Larry and I are mostly given credit for all of these wonderful events that we have, but it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge all of the members of the Black History Month Committee this year: Carol DeFalco, Megan Hannawalt, David McGlinchey, Jennifer Morgan, Gwyneth Packard, Matthew Person, Lindsay Scott, and Kama Thieler. It was all of us who worked to put all of these events on, and I'm very thankful to have been able to work with such a great team. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Jarmon. Mr. Jarmon developed an uncanny interest in Dr. Ernest Everett Just by reading The Black Apollo of Science, the biography of Dr. Just. In the year 1999, Mr. Jarmon petitioned the Prince George's County Public School Board to consider naming a new $26 million school Ernest Everett Just Middle School. Mr. Jarmon's attempts were rebuffed because he was informed his petition should carry the weight of an established organization. Failing to find organizational support, Mr. Jarmon created a not-for-profit organization, the Ernest Everett Just Foundation, Inc. Then the foundation petitions not only for the naming of the school, but that it be designated as a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics or STEM school. Both petitions were granted, and thus the Ernest Everett Just Middle School was created to promote the education of STEM students. Around 2007, the Ernest Everett Just Foundation searched for a sponsor to create a bond bill to raise funds to erect a life-size statue of Dr. Just on the campus of Ernest Everett Just Middle School. The state of Maryland granted the foundation $150,000 to erect the statue, and now the school and the statue are listed as national monuments for the whole world to appreciate. Currently, the foundation is attracting scientists, doctors, and other educators to mentor STEM students and to help raise scholarship funds for high school graduates pursuing STEM studies in college. And it's quite fitting for Mr. Jarmon to be giving us this lecture today, as the author of the book, The Black Apollo of Science, Dr. Kenneth Manning, was our first Woods Hole Black History Month lecturer about 40 years ago. So thank you for bringing it back round circle for us, Mr. Jarmon, and I'd like to welcome you to give your lecture.
Thank you, Angie, for your kind words, and because it is I who is honored to speak to you, Dr. Alate, Dr. Thieler, and the entire Woods Hole family about a subject that has captured my attention for almost 40 years. And I find it also ironic that this year is the 40th year that Woods Hole has recognized Black History Month. I also wish to thank Dr. Ambrose Gerald, retired, who became very instrumental as it relates to inviting me to this entire Woods Hole family and community. Therefore, the title of this lecture is, why is Dr. Ernest Everett Just so important to Black History Month? Black History Month started off as being Black History Week, and it was promoted as such by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Carter Godwin Woodson was born December 19, 1875, and was educated as an American historian, author, journalist, and the founder of the Association of the Study of African American Life and History. Dr. Woodson received graduate degrees from the University of Chicago in 1912. He was the second African American after W.B. Du Bois to obtain a PhD from Harvard University. Most of Dr. Woodson's academic career was spent at Howard University, where he eventually served as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Woodson became a member of the American Historical Association, and he quickly realized, and I quote Dr. Woodson, the AHA had no interest in Black history, end of quote. Although Dr. Woodson was a dues-paying member of the AHA, he was not allowed to attend its conferences. After careful observation, Dr. Woodson became convinced that the role and the contributions from people of color was being ignored and are misrepresented among white educators and historians. Therefore, with others like William D. Hargrove, George Cleveland Hall, Alexander L. Jackson, and James E. Stamps, they founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History on September the 9th, 1915 in Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Woodson was a member of the first Black professional fraternity, Sigma Pi Phi, and he was also a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Dr. Woodson believed that education and increasing social and professional contacts among people of color and white people could reduce racism, and for that reason, he promoted the organized study of African American history, and in 1926, Negro History Week was born. Now, the NAACP was founded February 12, 1909, partly as a response to the continuing horrific practice of lynching, employing mob violence, and in 1908, a race riot in Springfield, Illinois, the capital of Illinois, which happened to be the final resting place of the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. The summer race riots and the Black murderers that were held in Springfield in 1908 resulted in countless Blacks being lynched on August the 14th through August the 16th. The NAACP stated its goals as securing for all people the right guaranteed in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution, which was added to end slavery, create the equal protection of the law, and university adult suffrage, respectfully. Therefore, its principal objective is to ensure the political, educational, and social and economic equality of minority group citizens of the United States and eliminate race prejudice. The NAACP's mission is to remove all barriers of racial discrimination through the democratic process. Incidentally, Ernest Everett was born August 14th, 1883 in Charleston, South Carolina. When Dr. Woodson designated the second week in February as Negro History Week, that designation was given to mark the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Abraham Lincoln's birthday was February 12th, 1809, and Frederick Douglass' birthday was picked to be February 14th. No one knows what year. February 14th was picked as his birthday because February 14th was Valentine's Day. And those who know the story of Frederick Douglass may remember that he actually emancipated himself. He was born into slavery. He emancipated himself. And when he became well known as an orator, he wanted to know when his birthday was. He wrote to the only man that he thought may give him that information, who was his biological father, wrote him 3 times asking him when was his birthday. He never would tell him. So in Frederick Douglass' way of doing things, he declared February 14th, Valentine's Day, as his birthday. Since the NAACP was founded on February 12, 1909, it wanted to direct attention to that date each year by granting on that day one African American a distinguished honor, recognizing his or her scholarship, professionalism, leadership, grace, and the highest ethical and social standards that could be achieved by one person in a lifetime. Therefore, the NAACP created the Spingarn Medal. The Spingarn Medal was instituted in 1914 by the late J.E. Spingarn, then chairman of the NAACP Board of Directors. This award was a $100 gold medal, and its purpose was twofold. One, to call attention to the American people to the existence of distinguished merit and achievements among American and African descent, and 2, to serve as a reward for such achievement and as a stimulus to the ambition of youth of color. The committee that was put together to decide who would receive this first ever prestigious award were Bishop John Hurst, chairman of the committee; William Howard Taft, ex-president of the United States; John Hope, president of Morehouse College; Dr. James Dillard, director of the Jeans and Slaughter Funds; and Mr. Oswald Garrison Villard, president of the New York Evening Post Company. Ernest Everett was chosen for this award from a long list of candidates that were in many different professions, and he was recommended by men of the highest ethical, social, and professional stands. To add to Dr. Just's many personal accolades, his career as professor of the medical school at Howard University made him responsible for 35 out of 38 graduating students receiving certification as medical doctors immediately after graduation. A certification percentage rate that was highest in the country, and an academic achievement that was compared only to Harvard University. Therefore, the first ever Spingarn Medal was awarded to Ernest Just at an annual meeting of the NAACP held in New York City's Ethical Culture Hall, and it was awarded to him on February the 12th, 1915, by the governor of New York, the Honorable Charles S. Whitman, and in the presence of almost 2,000 people. Now to answer the question of the day, the question that this lecture poses, and a rhetorical question that has many answers to it. Why is Dr. Ernest Everett Just so important to Black History Month? Well, let's begin with Dr. Just was a role model. He was a brilliant scientist, a scholar, and a professional. He was meticulous, methodical, and he had very little patience for incompetence. What drove Dr. Just was knowing that his pursuit for excellence and his passion for research would in due time reveal the mysteries of life, add to his understanding to how the human body works. Where do diseases come from, and how to find cures to eradicate them? Dr. Just became important to Black history because he was an example for excellence. He understood social behavior and how to work within the funding system to obtain funds for research. And he understood the intricacies to minute details that so many others took for granted. Please take a look at all of the Spingarn Medal winners from 1915 through 2016 and notice what they all had in common. Now, please think about what made Dr. Just stand out from the others, who were also very famous in their undertakings in life history to get the Spingarn Medal. Well, Dr. Just had to work his entire professional career in the face of discrimination at a time when equal protection under the law was only a term for all minorities to debate because it had no practical application, meaning in American jurisprudence. So let's look at the chronology of events that contribute to the establishment of Black History Month to be in February. Some of these dates were considered to be created by happenstance, and some of these dates were planned to bring attention and to create a necessity to have February of each year Black History Month. The chronology of events go like this. Number one, February 12, 1809, Abraham Lincoln was born. Number two, February 14th, every year after 1835, Frederick Douglass' birthday was recognized. Number three, August the 14th, 1883, Ernest Just was born. And 25 years later, to the day, on August 14th, many Blacks were murdered, terrorized, and hung from trees in Springfield, Illinois, on August the 14th through August the 16th in 1908, which was also in Springfield, the final resting place of Abraham Lincoln. Number five, on February the 12th, 1909, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded 100 years after Abraham Lincoln's birthday and 6 months after the race riots that were held in Springfield. Number 6, on February 12th, again, February 12th, 1915, the NAACP first ever Spingarn Medal was awarded to Dr. Ernest Everett Just. Number 7, Dr. Carter G. Woodson started promoting Negro History Week the second week of February for each year starting in 1926. And number 8, after this country recognized Black History Week for 50 years, President Gerald Ford understood its significance and importance, and in 1976 expanded Negro History Week to designate the month of February as Black History Month. It was so important to the NAACP that its first recipient of its most prestigious award to go to the person with impeccable credentials, a history of scholastic academics, and the ability to motivate others and to reach for and or to achieve greatness, because the NAACP knew that the person that is selected would be used to set a bar for minority academics and professional achievements. Therefore, when the NAACP conducted its search for its first award recipient, it found out that E.E. Just attended Meridian, New Hampshire College Preparatory High School, Kimball Union Academy. Just completed the 4-year program there in 3 years and graduated in 1903 with the highest grades in the class. Then Just enrolled in Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, and also graduated Dartmouth as magna cum laude. While at Dartmouth, Just developed an interest in biology after learning about fertilization and egg development. Just won special honors in zoology and distinguished himself in botany, history, and sociology as well. Just was also honored as a Rufus Choate Scholar for 2 years and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. Just was also a candidate to deliver his graduation commencement speech at Dartmouth, but he was not chosen because the faculty decided it would be an embarrassment to the school to allow the only Black in the graduating class to address the crowd of parents, alumni, and benefactors. Although the faculty knew Ernest Just had the social graces to give that commencement address, the faculty believed it would have made too glaring a fact that Ernest Just had won just about every student prize imaginable. When the NAACP learned about all of Just's achievements, this information made their search easy, and it was also made complete. The brilliance of Ernest Just was on display during several meetings at Howard University in 1911, as he brokered an agreement between some students and the university's administration. After several meetings, Ernest Just, a faculty professor and student advisor, collaborated with 3 students to establish the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. It was the first Black fraternity to be established on a Black campus. Howard University's faculty and administration initially opposed the idea of establishing a fraternity, fearing that it could pose a political threat to Howard's white administration. However, with Ernest Just mediating this controversy, and despite its many doubts, the Omega Psi Phi fraternity Alpha chapter was chartered on Howard University's campus on November the 17th, 1911. The search committee that canvassed the country for more than 5 years to find the torchbearer to achieving a higher education for all African Americans was completely satisfied when a young Ernest Just separated himself from all other qualified candidates and distinguished himself as a teacher, a role model, a counselor, a trusted advisor, and a professional in every aspect of life. In 1910, Ernest Just was put in charge of a newly formed biology department at Howard University by President Wilbur P. Threlkeld. And in 1912, Just became head of the new Department of Zoology, a position he held until his death in 1941. When Ernest Just was first appointed to Howard University, he was also introduced to Frank R. Lilly, head of the Department of Zoology at the University of Chicago. Lilly was also director of the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and he invited Just to spend the summer of 1909 as his research assistant at the Marine Biological Laboratory. During this time and later, Just experiments focused mainly on the eggs of marine invertebrates. He investigated the fertilization reaction and the breeding habits of many different species, and for the next 20 years or more, Just spent every summer but one at the Marine Biological Laboratory. During Just's tenure at Woods Hole, Just rose from student apprentice to an internationally respected scientist. It is an understatement to declare Ernest Just as a genius when it comes to the mechanics and the design of experiments. In the biography about Ernest Just, written by Dr. Kenneth Manning, there were several stories he wrote about a student's interaction with Dr. Just in that book that I now wish to bring to your attention. And those stories should illustrate to you the character, the empathy that he had for others, and the ability that Ernest Just had to influence young student scientists. Ernest Just truly had a gift for science, and his genuine personality qualities were on display the more he advised and was sought after by his students. He was also the first African American to study as a scientist at the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole. The Marine Biological Laboratory was considered by many to be the most internationally renowned biological laboratory in the country. The second African American to study at Woods Hole was a bright young woman named Roger Arlene Young, who was taught at Howard University by Dr. Just. When Roger Young graduated Howard in 1923, Dr. Just offered her a position as his research assistant and as assistant professor of zoology. She accepted this offer and enrolled in the University of Chicago for her master's degree in zoology. The third African American to study at Woods Hole was a student who completed graduate studies at Brown University after his undergraduate studies at Morehouse College in Atlanta were completed. His name was Samuel Everett. Since it was customary to write a letter of reference to study at Woods Hole, Dr. Just, being the only minority there at the time, felt compelled to explain to Samuel Everett why he did not write a letter of reference for him to study at Woods Hole. Dr. Just told Everett, since Roger Young did not work out at the Marine Biological Laboratory, and that he, Ernest Just, sponsored her with the letter of introduction, and coupled with the fact that he did not know Samuel Everett at all, he did not feel comfortable writing a letter of recommendation for him. Just thought that Everett also was too young to study at the Marine Biological Laboratory. Regardless, after Just and Neighbor gave Neighbor his lengthy explanation as to why he did not sponsor him, they quickly found ways to collaborate and to support each other's experiments. Now to go back to the story of Roger Young and complete that. In June 1929, Young began her PhD in zoology at the University of Chicago under the tutelage of Frank Lilly. Her experiments testing the effects of ultraviolet radiation on marine eggs would serve as a starting point for her dissertation. 1 week before Young was scheduled to sit for her doctoral qualifying exam, Ernest Just left for Europe to work on some experiments there. And without her mentor by her side, Young failed her doctoral qualifying exam. When Young was under so much stress, she wrote to Dr. Lilly explaining the struggles of juggling her responsibilities to Howard University and to her doctoral research. She wrote, "The trouble is that for 2 years, I've tried to keep going under responsibilities that were not wholly mine, but they were not shared, and the weight of it simply wore me out." She also wrote, "I forced myself to go on so long that I automatically accepted arrangements for the examination, which I knew the 1st of last August I would fail unless there was some relief. Instead of relief, the situation became worse." It also needs to be documented that Roger Young did obtain a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania after failing to do so at the University of Chicago. Dr. Just and Dr. Lilly were both believed to be responsible and had a degree of ownership for the course that Roger Young had to take to complete her doctoral requirements. In the Manning book, there was also a story about a German scientist that came to Woods Hole to give a lecture. And Dr. Just attended his lecture as so many other scientists did. Well, during the course of the guest lecture, that scientist told a racial joke, and Dr. Just immediately jumped up and walked out of the lecture. Dr. Just did not return to that presentation and stayed in his cabin all day and all the next day without ever coming out. There were several attempts to get Dr. Just to come out of his cabin, but all attempts failed. On the 3rd day, Dr. Just came out of his cabin, went to breakfast as usual, and continued on with the rest of his day as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. And finally, there was another story mentioned in the Black Apollo Science that described Dr. Just preparing to have the 60th birthday party for Dr. Lilly at the Marine Biological Laboratory. Dr. Just encouraged everyone to speak at that party before he did at Lilly's birthday party. And when Dr. Just finally spoke, it was hard to hear even a pin drop. Of course, Dr. Just was complimentary to what all Dr. Lilly had done for him and for Woods Hole and the University of Chicago and the entire scientific community. And at the end of his congratulatory comments, Dr. Just mentioned that he had received more funds to conduct his research overseas in 1 year than he had in 20 years at Woods Hole. Maybe Dr. Just felt that he had to justify why he was considering leaving Woods Hole to conduct his research. Or maybe he felt embarrassed that he, as a top research scientist, was not commanding as much in funds for research as other advanced scientists he knew were getting. Or maybe he felt that he was giving Woods Hole one last chance to right his wrong and to make him feel the value that he felt that he deserved. No matter what Dr. Just reasons for his announcements and demeanor, it was not hard to believe that Dr. Just felt elements of discrimination, was dissecting the complementation of his lab work. Dr. Just may have left this world 80 years ago in October of this year, but in a larger sense, Dr. Just is still here with us, teaching us, mentoring us, counseling us to make our mark in this world by being truth tellers through science. Dr. Just realized the best scientists had to prove themselves by challenging the establishment. And reconfiguring old theories, and to find one's way in uncharted territory through examinations, re-examinations, testing cause and effect relationships, conducting hypotheses, thinking outside of typical confinements, more observations, documenting variances, and drawing conclusions only when necessary. While at 58 years, Dr. Just left us too soon, but he left us with these words and a lot to think about. Dr. Just said, and I quote, "We feel the beauty of nature because we are a part of nature, and because we know that however much in our separate domains, we abstract from the unity of nature. This unity remains. Although we may deal with particulars, we return finally to the whole pattern woven out of this." End of quote. Before ending this lecture, it would not be complete, or I would be negligent for any reasons if I failed to mention how calculating Dr. Just was when he devised a method to introduce to the world a lost manuscript and the importance of that word that he did, connecting biology to ethics and ethics to biology, including environmental ethics. In 1902, there was a Russian zoologist named Peter Kropotkin who argued that ethical behavior is as much and likely more a factor in evolution than competitive struggle, survival of the fittest. Dr. Kropotkin predicted that evidence confirming the evolution importance of mutual aid would someday emerge from the study of microorganisms. Dr. Just, in his 1939 book, The Biology of the Cell Surface, he supplemented a Charles Darwin emphasis upon struggle against the surrounding environment by adding Dr. Kropotkin's theory upon mutual aid and cooperation with the surroundings. Just further wrote, "Life is not only a struggle against the surroundings from which life came, it is also a cooperation with them." The Kropotkin theory of mutual aid and cooperation may be a better explanation of the cause of evolution than the prevailing popular conception of Darwin's idea of the struggle for existence. And this also applies with cells. The means of cooperation and adjustment is an ectoplasm. Just said he would deal with this point at a greater length in his forthcoming book. However, before he could persuade a publisher to print the said forthcoming work, Just died 27 October 1941. Thankfully, however, in May 2018, The Origin of Man's Ethical Behavior, an unpublished but written by Ernest Just in 1941, was discovered among the collected papers of E.E. Just at the Howard University Moreland Spingarn Research Center by Dr. Theodore Walker. Dr. Just may have been the first scientist in 1939 when the biology of the cell surface was printed to root ethical behavior in evolution process that reach all the way back to the evolution of cooperation among our earliest cellular ancestors. And furthermore, Dr. Just may have been the first to formulate a comprehensive law of environmental dependence. Now, before I ask for any questions that I can answer as it relates to this lecture, please permit me to say a few words about the Ernest Everett Just Foundation. The Ernest Everett Just Foundation Incorporated is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was created to promote science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM subjects, to middle and high school students, and to mentor STEM students through their collegiate years. It was also created to promote the life and legacy of Dr. Ernest Everett Just. We aim to reach our two goals by conducting lectures such as this one, and by our constant interactions, mentoring and counseling STEM students. Therefore, when the EEJFI notices that there were scholarships available for minority high school students here in Woods Hole, this foundation believes it can help to close the gap between finding ambitious STEM students and increasing the diversity at Woods Hole. It has been said that our institutions lose countless talent by not taking that extra step in promoting diversity. As much as we as a country are beginning to recognize foreign diversity, somehow we tend to overlook the diversity that's in our own backyard. Therefore, I am making an appeal to those who may decide who the future personnel changes, and especially students that will come to study at Woods Hole, will likely be to allow the EEJFI to offer some suggestions in students that would help Woods Hole to extend its efficiency lead over all other scientific laboratories in this country. And what a better way to ensure that this success can be made than by using the name and legacy of one of the world's most famous scientists, Dr. Ernest Everett Just. Thank you very much. And I'll turn this back over to Anji and Larry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jarmon. That was incredibly informative. We have a comment. Someone that says, not a question, just a comment, very informative talk. Thank you, Mr. Jarmon. I hope that Woods Hole has achieved a better record of social justice since Dr. Just's time here. And I wanted to comment on your offer to work with the foundation in the future and send students here. I will boldly speak on behalf of the Diversity Advisory Committee and say that we would welcome to have you join us in one of our committee meetings to talk about how we can do that, bring in some students in the future. I think that would be a fantastic part.
Would love to.
Absolutely. So let me move on to, we do have a few questions. Anonymous, is it so that Just's work at Howard University in comparison to his work in Woods Hole was a more administrative role? And was he limited in his capacity to conduct research at Howard?
No, actually he conducted research at Woods Hole, but he did, it was usually in the summertime, but he worked at Howard throughout the year and for 20 years, and every summer after that, when school was not going on, he was actually doing his research and laboratory work at Woods Hole. He had several things going on at Woods Hole, but he also actually saw where discrimination was holding him back, he could not do anything about what he was making at Howard University. He was making top dollar at Howard University, which was $1,500 a year. So he knew he had to supplement his salary by research and writing for funding, writing to the Rosenwald and Rockefeller foundations for funding. He continued to do that. And he felt like there were some elements of discrimination that was keeping him from getting the funding that he knew that he could get and that he saw other scientists around him were getting.
Thank you for that. Question about Dr. Young. Did Ernest Everett just ever discuss his feelings towards Dr. Young and what happened to her, perhaps in his book or in the Black Apollo of Science?
As far as it went in the Black Apollo of Science is where her career actually stopped at University of Chicago and at Woods Hole when she did not, she had to leave there to go to University of Pennsylvania to work on her doctoral work on her doctoral degree. And she did go to University of Pennsylvania. She received her PhD and actually did some teaching in several schools.
Great, thank you. We have someone who's asking about the Ernest Everett Just Middle School. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how the students there are doing?
Yes, thanks for that question. The Ernest Everett Just Middle School is doing very well. We, the foundation, what we try to do is to go over there, make a presence. We tell them about Ernest Just. We use the book. We encourage them to read. It's a hard read for them in the middle school, but we still encourage them to read it. We tell them about Ernest Just and how much he loves science, and we use that tool to also become judges to their scientific projects that they have every year. So we actually come together as judges for them and tell them about Just, tell them about Ernest Just. And there is a lot of memorabilia, a lab coat in the library that and pictures of Dr. Just in the school, in the library at Ernest Just Middle School.
Very nice. I remember science fair projects. Those were always fun. So kind of a general question, could you describe some of the challenges that Dr. Just may have experienced in his personal life? That's a question, and I'm personally interested in his family. Was his family with him when he came to Woods Hole, and how did they fare here?
Well, that's an interesting question because no, Just family was not allowed to come to Woods Hole, especially his wife. They did not allow her to come. As you know, the scientists that came there, they had cabins there, so they stayed and they ate there on campus. And but she was not allowed. This is another part of discrimination. And there is a story in the Black Apollo of Science about Dr. Just was world renowned at Woods Hole. I mean, doctors and scientists everywhere wanted his advice on their experiments. And he gave them freely his advice on how to create the experiment that they were trying to do. So, but eventually he had to leave Woods Hole and come back to DC. Well, they even came to DC to ask him questions and to pick his brain and what he can do. But so when they came to DC, they quickly found out that they could not go to Dr. Just's house because Dr. Just's wife would not let them in since they would not let her in Woods Hole. So so they had to, when they wanted to meet with Dr. Just, they had to find a place to meet because Dr. Just's wife, would not let them into her home. And so there was one place written about at when Dr. Just came to Washington, D.C., was along the time that Union Station was being created, and Washington, D.C. Union Station was a stop that was created, and along the time Dr. Just came to D.C. And it may have had a lot of transportation. You got to remember, was very, very hard to navigate. And when the scientists wanted to meet with Dr. Just, they had to go to Union Station. It was usually several, or not several, maybe one or two restaurants that you can meet with, blacks and whites could meet with and talk at Union Station. It was about the only place in Washington, D.C. because of discrimination. So, you know, they had to meet at Union Station at a restaurant to whenever they wanted to converse with Dr. Just. And these are elements of discrimination that we don't realize how deep they were at the time, and how much they played in shaping America, and how we all had to deal with it in some form or another, and Dr. Just had to also.
Wow, that definitely puts it into perspective. It's amazing to think about what science is probably or had been lost or not done
Yes,
because he couldn't stay here. He didn't have the funding, or I can imagine that it would have been difficult to be here doing science and not have your family with you for months at a time.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. And besides, he also uh, wanted to be there as much as he could for his family. So, and the other scientists had their family members there, but he could not have his at Woods Hole.
Hmm. Yeah, that's tragic. Well, I think we have time for one more question. So could you speculate on how Ernest Just's work impacts impacts science today? Perhaps more broadly, how his legacy impacts science today?
Well, I think Dr. Just was always finding or looking for the meaning for life. And his experiments that he did primarily at Woods Hole, and he took some of that work back with him to Howard University. And like I said, a lot of what Dr. Just did was dependent upon what he saw the needs for his people, the country, Black people as a whole. And he knew, even though when he was at Dartmouth, he was pushed and encouraged to go into medical science. He wanted to go into research scientists. And so that's why he continued on to the University of Chicago and go into research scientists. But when he became professor over the biology department at Howard University, he pushed all of his students into medical science because that's what was needed. And it was said that 35 out of 38 students at Howard University immediately became certified as doctors when they left Howard. And that designation was only at the time compared to Harvard University at that time. So he was competing with the best. And it gave Howard a lot of name recognition. Not only that, he was the greatest fund driver that created funds for Howard University also. Dr. Just, no one actually demanded or commanded more funds to come to Howard than Ernest Just. People just really, did that. But his salary was not reflective of that. But his salary was compared to others in the scientific community, in the Black community, not the scientific, in the Black community. And he always tried to escape that because he knew he was qualified. He knew he was better than that. He knew he was better than just taking what they gave him, especially when he saw the market around him, that he was able to see through the scientists at Woods Hole, who were sprinkled all over the country at University of Chicago, Pennsylvania, and other places. And so in talking with them in the summertime, he knew what they were making, and it just did not sit well with him, because he always felt like science is the proof and within itself and whatever you need. Let the science do the talking. And he really believed in that. And I think it really bothered him when he was working, trying to get his last book published. The publishers told him that he did not know ethics. So what he was trying to do, Dr. Just was trying to do, was to blend biology with ethics and ethics with biology. And there was no bioethics field at that time. There is now, but when there was no field at that time, they did not think that Ernest Just was qualified to write about this. And as it has come out now, even though his manuscript has been lost for so long, now that it has come out to light, scientists are really looking at it and seeing all the nuggets of information that Dr. Just saw 80 years ago. 80 years ago, that the scientific community is finally beginning to wake up now.
Wow, 80 years before we realized that we needed to know that information. I'm glad to hear that his manuscript was found, that it's not lost forever.
Right.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jarmon, for an amazing lecture. We really appreciate your time and all of the insight that you provided us.
Thank you.
This does conclude our official Black History Month 2021 events for Woods Hole. I would like to point people that we do still have our virtual Harambe going on our website. If you go to our website, to the very bottom, click on virtual Harambe, you'll see a page that has various recipes submitted by people in the community and the recipe book from, I believe it was 1984, that we got a copy of from Dr. Gerald. So thank you for that. I'd like to also extend an invitation for anyone who is interested in joining the Black History Month Committee next year. Our committee is made up primarily of people from the 6 science institutions, but we do have members of the greater Woods Hole and Falmouth community on our committee. So if you're interested in joining us next year, please send an email to myself or Larry. Our emails are on the website, and we look forward to hopefully having some new faces on our committee with us next year. Thank you again, Mr. Jarmon, and for everyone for joining us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.